Our next speaker here probably needs no introduction. I expect everybody in the room knows who he is. And I won't give you any details because I have a feeling Michael's going to cover it himself. So it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Melaniphy, who's President and CEO of the American Public Transportation Association. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Excellent. Did you have a good session there with Dr. Brown? Thank you very much for being here. That's huge. It's a huge deal. President. Thank you, Ken, for the opportunity to be here. It is a pleasure. I bring you greetings on behalf of all of my colleagues and coworkers and friends at APTA in Washington, D.C. I'm Michael Melaniphy. I'm the President and CEO of APTA. And the format we're going to do here, I'm going to do about 20 minutes of a presentation on what's going on in the industry, what's going on within industry as a whole, what's going on in Washington. That part will take about this long, so there's nothing happening. And maybe a little more. And then from there, I'm going to have the privilege of having all of you here to share with me in the celebration as we give a very, very special award to our good friend, Dr. George Smirk. So we'll do a little update, a little business, and then we'll do a little celebrating, and then we'll do a little lunch and tour of the great Think products and services on display. So put that all together. Well, I want to thank Kent for inviting me to come down and speak. Certainly appreciate it. It's always an honor to come down and to be back here in Bloomington, a city that I love and cherish so very much, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. I want to thank Lou May and Perry Mall for inviting me, and for all the for Bloomington Transit, and for the great people at Campus Bus for hosting and doing that. Give credit to Lou. He called me and just twisted my arm to no end until I said, okay, I'll come. And so, Lou, you're a very convincing guy. I'm going to put you in sales after you retire from transit. And again, I want to thank the Chairman of the House Ways and Means for being here, and thank you, Dr. Brown. And I want to thank our dear friend Marisol and the good people from FTA for being here. It's great. I know you were talking earlier, you're out in the circuit as we all go and do these things, but it's always, it never undervalue how important it is to have your regional administrators here to bring that message from Washington, D.C., to bring the staff and all the things that they do. You all make it happen, and we're so appreciative of all you're doing, especially all the chaos of, are we going to have to hold back money or not? Are we going to have an allocation of those things? So thanks for all that you do, Marisol. We really, really appreciate that. And Ken, congratulations. You're having a great run as president. Really appreciate all you're doing, and you're doing a great job of not just running your agency, it's spreading the word across the state, lobbying those who are in the State House, but also leading the organization. We appreciate that. And speaking of Houston, we've got a great expo coming up in Houston, Texas in October. I look forward to all of you being there. Ken was explaining to me that it used to be pronounced the way his name is pronounced, and then they screwed it up in Texas and called it Houston instead. So that's his version of the story. I can't explain it, but we welcome you all to join us October 11th through 15th. It's our once every 3-year annual expo and annual meeting. It's the largest international transit expo we have in North America, and some say in the world. About 15,000 people will be there, 700 vendors, 300,000 square feet. It will be fantastic. Great comfortable shoes and packed granola, because you'll need both to get through there. It's the only way to do it. I'm very pleased to talk here. That's our logo for Expo, so certainly encourage you to. I got to read my own slides today. And it's one to be back here in Indiana. We have a rich history with APTA and with the state of Indiana. Many of you recall last year we had our bus and Transit Expo in Indianapolis, and Mike Perry and the team did a phenomenal job. It was such a great conference we held in Indy, and so many people just raved about it. I said, I didn't know Indianapolis was just great. It was so cool. And for myself, I hadn't been there in many years. It was great to see how the city has changed and evolved, and the great support from the mayor and the council and others. Really, really nice to see that. Many of you may know I have connections to Campus Bus here in Indiana as well. I'm a graduate, proud graduate of Indiana. Started out driving the new look buses, and we had the Armstrong power steering. And I laugh now because our biggest, we had Armstrong power steering. There was no air conditioning, there was no vents. I mean, it was just a pedestal with a little foam on it. And now drivers say, oh, my lumbar is not working right. Come on. Get out of here. As I was, so I still have my operating manual, so if I got to go back, I just renewed my CDL. My wife seriously said I just renewed my CDL, my physical, so I got a backup plan if I need it, which is great. I had the privilege not just driving Campus Bus, but I had the privilege, I got to be a team driver for Bobby Knight and the Hoosier basketball team. And that was a real privilege to get to do that. And talk about how small life gets. So we had a charter operation here. And so I'm there with my good-looking mullet from the 80s and an MCI bus. And I later went on to become executive vice president of Motor Coach Industries, MCI. So it's funny how life comes together. But that was a cool bus. I'd like to drive one of those someday. And ended up being one of the guys that helped run the company. So it was kind of neat to do that. But it's not. This isn't all about me. Okay, it is. No, well, it's not all about me. Let's talk about transportation and the state. This is a momentous thing. 100 years ago, exactly 100 years in 1904, the Indianapolis Traction Terminal was built. And let me share some stats for those who weren't here with Dr. Smirk when this was opened. It was, you can see him, he's right there. It was the largest interurban station in the world at the time. The traction terminal served nearly 500 trains a day. 7 million passengers at its peak. This state knows how to do good transportation and move people around. There's a great foundation, great opportunities to do this in the future. When we talk about what we did here in Indiana, we have had great ridership across this nation in public transportation. We had last year 10.7 billion trips in public transportation. 10.7 billion. Let's put some structure around that. Last year on air carriers, we always talk about aviation, like people rode on the nation's airlines around this country. There were 700 million trips on aviation last year, commercial aviation. 10.7 billion trips on public transportation. And we took enough trips that they drove far enough that it was the equivalent of 22 round trips to Jupiter. And let me tell you, you have to have a lot of seniority to bid that Jupiter run. That's a big deal. It was definitely hard. Now, 1956 was the last time we saw ridership that high. That's back when we had Thin Elvis on the radio and Eisenhower was in the presidency. That's how long it's been since we've had ridership this high. It is a momentous time. There was a sea change going on. We're going to talk to one of the metrics about that. Big deal. I was still excited about it. He thinks it's a good deal. Let's talk about what's going on around the state. Here in Indianapolis, just up the road, Indigo had record ridership in 2013. They ended the year with more than 10.2 million trips. That's the highest ridership they've seen since 1991. And we're seeing good stories all over the place. Nationally, we're having a good start to the year. We had 2.6 billion trips taken on public transit in the first quarter. And when you think about the first quarter, I know as we sit here in August, we still have fond memories of the polar vortex that grabbed this state and this country. And yet people went out in record numbers and stood on those street corners and got on their buses and trains. And we're very appreciative of that and see those continuing ridership numbers. And Bloomington and Muncie both saw ridership increases in the first quarter of this year. Some great numbers, and we're really excited about that. So let's put it on a national perspective and help put some scale around this. Let's look at a time frame from 1995 to 2013, a nice block of time that spans the recession and otherwise. We look at the U.S. population grew 20% during that time frame. Okay? Vehicle miles traveled, VMT, how much people are driving their automobiles, just 22%. So just tracking right along as population grew, drivers were growing the same number of miles. But look at public transit growth, 37% growth in this nation. Almost 2 times the growth rate of the population of this country. There is absolutely a sea change happening. People are choosing to take public transportation. It is a choice they're making because you all are putting great service on the street and creating opportunities for people to move about their communities and to be thriving and vibrant within their towns and cities. Now let's look about some of the things that are also happening. Election days. We track public transit tax initiatives across the country. We've been doing it since 2000. And what we've seen is that people are supporting public transportation numbers even higher than in many places they're supporting their local school bond initiatives. This is amazing. We're seeing passage rates exceeding 70% since 2000. Last year there were 15 public transit tax initiatives across the nation. 11 of those 15 passed better than 70% passage rate. People are trusting the public transit operators because they know who those people are. You will stand up in front of your communities and say, trust me, this is a project we're working on. They hope they can know who's there, they know who's building it, they'll hold you accountable, you know the projects you're going to do, and you're delivering them, and you're providing good service, making differences in your communities. This is a very, very good story. And as we look at those things going forward, obviously you had a momentous time through a significant and long, hard-fought battle. Governor Pence signed legislation authorizing a referendum to raise income taxes for future public transit. And it was good that you've gotten that message across. These things are incremental baby steps. You never have one giant win, right? You never have one giant win. It's all little baby steps, and you've got to do that, and it's important to do those things as we move forward. Why? Because of all the good service people got Indiana vehicles in here. See, I got good staff that put this stuff in here. But one of the reasons is because we're moving how we look at transportation. When I was raised as a transit manager, through good education here in Indiana, it was all about butts and seats, about moving people from A to B. That's what we did. Focus, reliable, safe, dependable, on time. Just like any other public service, right, Dr. Smirk? It's like police, fire, water, sewer, transit, on time, reliable, safe, same time every time. But we're learning we have to be about more than just moving people from A to B. We're about community redevelopment, we're about access, we're about aging in place, we're about redeveloping our communities and about economic development. It's about mobility management, it's about how do we work together, how do we make our system of our city, our county, our state work better together. Because it used to be when we grew up, transportation was a binary choice. You took a car or you took transit, you did one or the other. And now as new generations have come in, technology has caught up with us. We're seeing people that are taking different trips for different needs each day. They'll take a shared use bike, they'll take a car, they'll take a train. They can do all that in the same day. So people are changing how they're using their communities, and we're changing land use in our communities. We're going to talk a little more about what that means. But mobility management, as we evolve as managers in this country, we're learning we have to be able to speak finance, we have to be able to speak land value and land usage and cross-utilization and how things move about our communities. When you think about it, many of our services, police, fire, water, sewer, they stop at their hard borders. They're bounded by geopolitical lines. City-county boundaries stop. That's why you see roads that are full lane going into 2-lane for no reason other than there is a county or city line there. That's not how we move about our communities. And our transit systems often are regional and they reflect how we move about our communities. And that's why we are really in the forefront as public transit operators to help move that dialogue. We have a responsibility to help forward the growth of our communities and help to reflect the movement of how people move about our cities, counties, and towns and how they do that on public transportation. And what are some of the impacts of that? We did a study last year with the National Association of Realtors, one of the largest associations in this country, huge organization. And what they found was that residential housing stock, they studied residential housing stock across the country. In the time frame of 2008 to 2013, during the time of our toughest economic times of our generation, during the recession, you know what they found? They found that residential housing stock along high-frequency transit corridors was 42% more resilient. What does that mean? As prices dropped, and many of us felt that in our own homes, right? The values dropped. The value of homes along high-frequency transit corridors dropped 42% less. And as values came back, they came back much more quickly. People valued having homes along transit. In fact, it was equally as valuable as being a waterfront property. And if you were in California, a waterfront property along a transit line along the ocean, you were really hitting it out of the park. It was great. That joke's placed way better in California. But, tougher here. But what's important here is that people are valuing, they're speaking with their dollars. It isn't us, the transit guys, telling the story. It's people doing it. Where they're spending their money, they're saying I value living along a transit corridor because that's access to jobs. And as we looked across our kitchen tables during the economic downturn, we said, how do we bring some stability to our household as gas prices fluctuated like crazy? In the old days, gas prices would go up, it would stay, then it might go down, it would stay. Now it does that in an afternoon. And so it was hard to budget your family budget, but if you rode transit, you knew how much it would cost every day. So people moved along transit corridors to have that dependability in their family budget. And you know what? They tried it, they liked it, they stayed, and they want more of it. So that's why this stuff matters. As we see development of commercial development, where we're putting in streetcars, a renaissance of streetcars in this nation that's happening. And of course, we're finding as they dig up the infrastructure to put in the rail lines, what do they find? The rail lines that were there before, in the very same place. It's crazy. What we're seeing as we announce these corridors, these alignments through communities, developers are buying up that land or putting in the businesses along there before the track bed is even laid. And it's happening along BRT corridors as well. This is exciting. There truly is a sea change happening around the country. But let's not forget that for every $1 we invest in public transportation, it creates $4 in turnover because the economic returns, and those are real numbers. When you invest in public transportation, you get those numbers. In fact, we did a study on the economic impact of public transit investment. We hired an economist to look at this. One of the most important things we found is that, let us not forget, the majority of the investment of the Federal Transit Administration is where Marisol, it's in capital investment, especially cities over 200,000. The federal government does not build buses and rail cars and transit stations. The private sector does. Fully 74% of the federal dollars that go into the transit industry flow right through the private sector. So let's be thankful. Let's thank all those private sector members that are here. They're supporting, they're sponsoring this event here today. They're here to share their wares. They're here to help be a vital part of our industry. And they're creating jobs across this nation. So even if you buy a bus from Jim Ryan and Gilligan and build it in beautiful Hayward, California, many of the supplies that come from that are coming all across this country, including from the state of Indiana. So you are creating jobs here if the bus is built somewhere else because that support structure, that supply base is nationwide. It makes a difference in every district around the country. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Look at one other statistic. For every $1 billion invested in public transportation, more than 50,000 jobs are created or sustained in this country. We are a big business. We're a $56 billion a year business. We have over 400,000 people directly employed, over 2 million people directly or indirectly employed in our public transportation industry. We make a difference. But to do that, to make those investments in the long term, we need long-term, reliable, dependable funding from these guys up on Capitol Hill. We need that long-term investment, a multimodal investment in all of surface transportation. As you know, we're working really hard on the new replacement for MAP 21, MAP 22, as I like to call it. Some people have different names for it. Perhaps Grow America is one of the names for it, I've heard perhaps. The bill put forth by the administration, we're very excited about that first bill they've transmitted in 6 years. We're excited to see that good, strong, robust bill. We're very supportive of what we see in the Grow America bill. Now, as you know, the Highway Trust Fund, of which the Mass Transit account is a piece, is running out of money. In fact, it's been running out of money for a while. We've been supplementing it by about a third for a number of years now. And it's just before Congress went into recess, literally within hours of when they went into August recess, they put forth a $10.8 billion short-term gap that's going to offset the need for to put money out of the general fund to help sustain us into May of next year. Let's not forget that May is a short 292 days away. This is only a short-term gap. All it does is get us through November elections and through the holidays, and we're going to be right back at it again. And potentially, with the Congress, it looks very different. We're going to come out of the 113th Congress and go to the 114th. Looks very likely the Senate's going to flip to the Republicans. It's going to be a different Congress. As we look at how it goes together, we still have many parts that have to fit with this. We have an authorization that goes to May 30th. But let's not forget, when you have a bill, you have to have authorization and appropriations. The appropes bill, the funding. The authorization is the mother may I. The appropes is the yes you may, here's the money. That bill currently runs out September 30th, a short 49 days from now. So continue to watch that. We're not through it all yet, and it's not unusual to see games continue to be played. We've got authorization here, approach. Oh, we didn't quite make it a little short. So we have to watch those things. And how long those funds are appropriated and allowed is what gives the FDA the ability to make apportionments. If they're short-term and they can't make apportionments, you have longer term so you can make those apportionments, get those funds out to you that's needed so desperately. Well, let's not forget the midterm elections. The ever important midterm elections. See the few commercials on TV have you? Are just 83 days away. And even in many ways, more importantly, the presidential election is only 818 days away. And we are definitely in a presidential election cycle right now. And that's one of the real concerns as we look at it in May next year, then we're through the midterms, boom, we're right into full-blown, hard-at-it presidential election cycle. And then all kinds of crazy things happen when you're in that cycle. So we must continue to be vigilant, we must tell the story. And so there's a couple of ways that happen. Certainly, our role up in D.C. is to do that. I live and work in Washington, D.C., and my role is to be there to testify on behalf of the industry, to be our spokesperson. So whether I'm in front of House T&I there, some of our friends from League of Cities and NPOs, or I'm with Secretary Fox, that was 2 weeks ago with our chairman, Peter Varga from Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're up there telling and pitching that story, but it's more than about just us doing it. You have to do that as well. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But we're up there, we're testifying, we're telling your story. That's why I love to come to these state conferences to hear the local stories, because the local stories matter. When you're an elected official, having a local connection matters, understanding why it matters in your district. You have to be able to tell that story. We'll talk some more about that. Next thing we can do is we try to keep you guys updated, reading passenger transport. Hopefully you're all doing that. So you're trying to keep everybody updated. There's a lot of stuff going on. Certainly encourage you to do that. Another thing we encourage you to do, we started a program a year ago at the grassroots level called the Voices for Public Transportation. And we have created a program called Where Public Transportation Goes, Community Grows. We actually hired the firm that ran President Obama's re-election campaign. Where they talked about the micro-targeting. It could tell you what color shirt you're going to wear tomorrow, and they could target that and have a targeted message to that. We've hired them to create this organization, Voice for Public Transportation. We have over 90,000 people in this country that have signed up to be advocates for public transportation. Not just saying, I like transit, they're saying, I will be educated, I will send letters, I will meet with legislators to tell that story. And when we mobilized them very recently, they sent 6,829 of these people sent 20,649 letters to all 535 offices in Congress. That's extraordinary. And that's the passion. That is gathering the passion of your riders, your community supporters, to tell the story of why transit matters. Not just in big cities along the coast, small cities, rural communities, all across this nation, what you do really matters. But it's going to be someone dialysis, people to work, people shopping, whatever it is. We have to tell that story. And so we've got those advocates, we've got that, because we have to tell it on a retail basis. You can't just say, we're going to tell the Republicans this, the Democrats this, it'll all be good. It doesn't work that way. Frankly, much doesn't work at all in Congress right now. And when we have a formalized program, we don't have earmarks anymore, you have to give your member of Congress a reason to care. You have to tell them that local story. You have to give them the opportunity to see and touch and feel your systems. And to get out there and to understand it, and so they can tell your story. One of the challenges I put forth to you is, think about, could your delegation members walk onto your property and say, that's where my federal dollars are. They're in that, and that. And if they can't do that, it's on all of you to help them understand that. So when they're in town, when they're back in district, and they're driving down the street to the next event at the Rotary Club or Exchange Club, wherever they're doing their thing, they see that transit stop, and they go, there's federal dollars in it, I need to take care of that. That bus up there, there's federal dollars in it, I need to care. Give them that reason to care. As we look at why is that so important, why we see these regulations, we're seeing this shift. Millennials are really changing how they look at transportation. They don't want to own cars. They want to socialize. They want to stay on their phones. They want to be able to live in communities that are walkable or sustainable. They want to have choices. So you've seen these stats. The peak was back in '83 when people were getting driver's licenses. Young people are waiting longer and longer to get licenses, saying, I don't want a car. Average new car price now, $34,000. They don't want that new car. They better have a smartphone, socialize with their friends, take public transportation. They're changing how we're moving about in our communities. But it's not just this end of the genealogical spectrum. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's these people too, right? There's many of you in here. The baby boomers. You have this shirt in your closet, I know you do. You don't have to raise your hand, I'm not going to out you. But baby boomers, they're moving back into the communities too. They're moving back into the downtowns, into the condos and the apartments, because they don't want to drive all over the place in their leased cars either. They want to walk in the community. They want to be able to socialize and have coffee and have access to doctors and to the park and all these things. Both ends of the genealogical spectrum are demanding more public transportation. They're changing how our cities are built. They're changing land use. This is a big shift that's happening in our country. And so as you share those stories, bring your member of Congress to your business, to your agency. Help them, show them. Put them behind the wheel of your bus. Block off the parking lot, put up cones, have safety people there. But let them drive it. They will tell that story for many times and take their picture. Nobody gets to drive a bus, just us professionals, right? Let them drive around the parking lot and they'll love it. And they'll tell their friends. And they'll tell that story over and over again. And that's how you get them to care. But don't just have them meet the management people. Have them meet the drivers, the mechanics, the dispatchers. Make it personal. Help them meet the constituents that vote for them and support them in their communities that do other things. And see these are real people impacted by real dollars. This stuff really, really makes a difference. And you've got a couple of key people that are in our Congress. You've got Mary Bouchard's on the House T&I committee. You got Democrat Andre Carson sits on the same committee. You got Todd Young, who's on the House Ways and Means Committee. You've got Senator Dan Coates, who sits on the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. These are important people. They help make a difference, and it helps when they hear your story. They love meeting with me, who doesn't, of course, but we bring the national story. I'll bring national stats, national stories, but when they get the local story from you all, that makes a huge difference. And we get together each year, we help to fund these grassroots programs. It's not just us that are doing it. You all are telling your story. There's grassroots organizations that are telling the story as well. And we get together each year with the National Association of Public Transportation Advocates to provide grants to help these grassroots organizations tell that local story. And I am very pleased to announce here today, ladies and gentlemen, that APTA and NAPTA are awarding $5,000 to the Indiana Citizens Alliance. And we've got Kim and Edson here. You guys are doing great work, and I want to recognize Kent McDaniel and Michael Terry also gave letters of support for that program. It's a good program. There were over 47 applicants for the program. 15 got funded. You guys are doing great work. Keep up your efforts. Support communicating, helping state officials understand it all. Congratulations. You guys are doing really, really good stuff. And that's part of what we do in this industry is we have to go out and do that. We have to work together. We have to lift all the boats, and it's so important that we do that. So as we wrap up the part about what's going on in this nation, I want to say to each of you, I truly appreciate what you do. I don't run buses, I don't run trains anymore. I used to. I ran 4 different transit agencies. I was also a manufacturer with Motor Coach Industries. I've done these things. I've been in your seats. I've built systems. I've run systems. I've passed transit taxes. I've been out there helping a little lady get to the service. I've done all those things. I have an appreciation for what you do, and what you do really matters. It's not always easy. It's not always glamorous. You're out there scrubbing the bus and meet with the mayor on the same day. I know what that's like. I want to say thank you for what you do. You do the hard work that gives me the opportunity to share your message in this nation. And I thank you very much for that opportunity. So now I'm going to change gears a little bit. I have the distinct privilege as the head of the American Public Transportation Association, the head of the industry nationwide, every once in a while to go out across the country and to recognize truly great leaders in our industry, people who have shaped not just what's going on now, what's going on for generations, what will go on in the future. And I am very privileged and honored today to have the opportunity to recognize a truly great leader, Dr. George Smirk, who's joined us here today. We're so grateful that you're here. It's my honor to recognize Dr. Smirk for his tremendous influence on the public transportation industry and for a lifetime of academic distinction. You mentored me and so many others in the public transportation industry. You taught us to respect the industry, to always be professional, to always look at us as being on par with police, fire, water, sewer, to be a critical part of our industry, to put forth and be the best. And if we put forth the image and the hard work that this is the best operation, is professional, does all the things in a very good professional way, you can trust us that the industry will move forward. And we have gone forth as your apostles and done those things and have carried that message forward. And it's happening. We're seeing it. The Renaissance is happening right now. And much of that goes back to your hard work, the things that you've done. The industry looks much different from when you first joined us here. And so many important things have happened, and so much of it has been led by Dr. Smirk. Let's go back to the early years, shall we? Let me give you a little background. How many people he's reaching. He was just telling me about it in a meeting he was at in 1966 of the predecessor organization. APTA's been around since 1882. We changed our name in 72. We were ATA before, and he was in a meeting in 66 about the time that I was being conceived, I think. And so we appreciate all the long-term work that you've done. But back in 1969, Dr. Smirk founded and became the director of the Institute for Urban Transportation. Under his leadership, the Institute was designated a Center for Transportation Research and Management Development, and it developed a national transit management training program that attracted, these are impressive numbers, professionals from 169 different transit agencies from 34 different states, several countries. Talk about having a big reach. This is huge. It's touched lives all across the nation. He also made a name for himself outside the world of academia by helping to create the Bloomington Transit in 1972 by taking an active role in governing public transportation systems at a state and local level. And he didn't just do it here in Bloomington. No, he did it. He helped save the nation's last electric interurban line, the South Shore Railroad, by working to form the Northern Indiana Commuter Transportation District. And Joe's here as well, and we appreciate the representative of NICTE, and any of us who were students of his, we heard about this railroad in every class. But the work that you've done is still there. It's carrying people every day. Great work. Thank you for your leadership on that. You don't just teach it, you do it. I think that's what brought so many of us to respect that hard work that you've done, that you were active in it, you were passionate about it, you shared these things. In 1992, you took on that hands-on experience in transit operations when you were tapped to be the director of transportation at Indiana University, and you continued to teach and manage services until you retired in 2003. Dr. Smirk was also a prolific writer. He authored 6 major books on urban transportation and wrote so many articles and contributed to so many, edited so many things. It's incredible. And you've seen pictures of what his house used to look like. There's lots of literature that he contributed to. His career has been filled with many honors from his transportation colleagues and teaching associates. But he considers the scores of teachers and public transit managers across the U.S. to be his greatest legacy. And there are many of us. Last year, we had the great privilege of the 4th of July weekend to come together and to celebrate Dr. Smirk's 80th birthday. There were more than 30 of us that came down here, and we took our 4th of July holiday and we celebrated at IMU, and it was great. And many of us are in the room here today, and it's a real testament. And when I share this story across the nation, people are taken aback. They went, "Oh my God, you stay in touch with the professor, and you all still come together?" This is a powerful fraternity, those of us that are Smirkies. Where's the shirt? The shirt's in the room. There's the shirt. We're Smirkies. Yeah. Absolutely badge on. Now, what's more depressing is that thing still fits him. Like, that's just crazy. There's nothing from my college years that fits me. Not even my hat fits me. I want to read you a few comments from some of Dr. Smirk's students. I think they really tell the story. One is Paul Ballard, who's currently the CEO in Fort Worth, and worked here, was a student here, worked here at Campus Bus, Bloomington Transit. He was very involved in these things. Paul says, when I was a 21-year-old New England native, I read a column by Dr. Smirk about the public transportation management program at IU. I bought an airline ticket for Bloomington, Indiana, so I could study under Dr. George Smirk, and I've never looked back in my career. And our very own Ken McDaniel, executive director of ITA, said about Dr. Smirk, he said, I started taking his classes as an elective just because one of my roommates said it was fun, and I was hooked. He offered me a job after I got my MPA, and I started working at IUT, and I spent my entire working career in transportation. Dr. Smirk was my educator and my mentor. And many, many of us can say that and say it proudly. Is that pretty accurate what I said, you said? Okay. Yeah. People did good research, that's good. His influence spread well beyond just his students, though. As Earl Dumay, GM of Bloomington Transit, points out, in my 30 years of knowing and working with Dr. Smirk, I've been blessed to see the impact that he's had on so many of his students, affecting all the Smirkies. Many of whom have gone on to become leaders in the industry. He's been a tireless advocate, a supporter, and a user of public transportation in our nation, our great state of Indiana, and our local community here at Bloomington. Dr. Smirk has touched the lives of countless people who are following his dreams of providing mobility for all. And Lou, thank you for those words. So many of us have shared that. And I won't read the ones from, there's so many. There are so many of us across the nation. And we get together, we celebrate, and we keep track. We're always asking, how's Dr. Smirk doing? And Perry and Lou and others share those stories. And Ken, thank you for us keeping us updated. And thank you to Paul for getting me around and sharing all the things. What a wonderful son that you have. So if I'd like to say thank you from me, your mentor, your friend. You have been so tremendous to me, and I can't express the gratitude I have. There's no question that I wouldn't have had the privilege of driving a campus bus, driving for Bobby Knight, He used to make fun of me because I used to keep my sandwiches and stuff in the front of the dashboard. So you got to be professional, Melaniphy. Get rid of the Hawaiian shirt. Drive like you're a driver. He was right. But you created those opportunities for me to give me the support and knowledge. If I didn't have that background, I wouldn't have the career I've had of running for agencies and being in the private sector and now running the association. But well, many of you know that I drove the bus. I used to pick up my girlfriend in the bus, and it's her sorority sister would say, "Your bus is here." What many of you don't know is I met her because of Dr. Smirk. He gave this beautiful young co-ed a phone number and said, "Call this guy if you want to learn about transportation and work at a transit internship program." And we've been married 25 years now. We had a bus cake at our wedding. And yeah, we just had wheels on the bus, we really did. It was the groom's cake, it wasn't the main cake, don't get scared. But we're so touched by that my wife and my kids, we drove down 330 miles last night to be here to join you, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So this means a lot to us, so thank you so very much. And so it is my great honor, if you will all join me in recognizing today, it is APTA's privilege to present Dr. George Smirk with the APTA Lifetime of Academic Distinction Award. This is tremendous.
Recognize all the hard work I've done. Dr. Smirk, it is my honor to present you with this outstanding lifetime achievement. And let you say some words.
Yes.
Can you imagine a professor?
Yes. Put on the overhead projector so I brought it over. It's good to see some of you. Others. Marty Senators here, I'm not sure I'm glad to see him. Marty.
Right here, George.
Hey, I was looking at some pictures that were taken when Marty worked at the Institute of Urban Transportation. You won't believe this. He's a lot better looking now. Age improves things. Wine and cheese and Marty Senators. Mike referred to the meeting, the first ATA meeting, which is 1966. I'm 81 now, and I would have helped lower the average age of the people attending. It looked like a geriatric convention. A bunch of old geezers. And all they talked about is they didn't like the federal aid to urban transportation because they're going to tell us what to do. You know, the industry is going bankrupt, and you're saying, don't give us anything. There's something to the message in that, which I'm not sure. Anyhow, I was sitting at the table next to a guy who ran a charter company here, and also over the road bus. And he said, "What do you do?" I said, "I work at Indiana University." He was going to stab me with his fork. He said, "Campus bus is taking my business away." And I said, I don't know how to answer that. Anyhow, APTA is a much better organization than ATA. I thank you all. Those of you who are my students, thank you for showing up here. Those of you who aren't my students, I thank you for showing up here. And this guy's pretty good.
Before you sit down, what to do is we have the photo, the group photo. We have framed it. We want to present it to you to keep on your desk. You can remember all of us. And then if all of you are Smirkies or want to be Smirky, want to come join us, we'll take our group picture. Dr. Smirk will put it in passenger transport. And when we do our annual meeting in Houston in October, we're going to play this video. We're going to show this picture to everybody so we can recognize the great work of Dr. George Smirk. Please give him a round.